Hey, 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 welcome to Studio Classroom on the air. Your English will improve today. Friends, my name is Gabe, and I have a question for you. Have you made any life decisions that you felt bad about? If you could go back in time, you would do them over and make very different choices. What are you supposed to do with that feeling of guilt that you made the wrong decision? If you're not sure, then today's lesson is for you. It's called Ignoring Your Biggest Regrets. The feeling of regret is something that most humans can relate to. It's something that we have all felt at one time or another. But for some people, the feeling is very strong. You've heard others say, live with no regrets, or simply, no regrets. And you wonder if it's possible to actually have no regrets. Let's discuss this very important topic together today.
Ignoring your biggest regrets. Don't hide from regret. Learn from it. What's better, to live a life without regrets or to have lingering pain over past mistakes? Almost all of us would choose to avoid the pain of wishing we'd done things differently. Regrets, people often feel, are to be avoided. Mistakes may be unavoidable, but they should be kept to a minimum. And when they do occur, the best course of action is to ignore them as inevitable steps on our journey. That seems logical, at least until you consider that one of the criteria for psychopathy is an inability to feel regret.
Now we have a very important topic to talk about, ignoring your biggest regrets. Perhaps it's a question that we should ask. Should we ignore our regrets? What do you think about regrets? Friends, should you live with no regrets or learn from your mistakes? Well, before we get into this lesson, let's take a closer look at that word regret, because it appears all throughout our lesson as a noun. Okay, even in our title, your biggest regret, that's a noun. A regret is something that you wish you had not done in the past, or perhaps you wish you did something that you didn't do.
That's right. Now, I know that people might approach this topic a little differently. Now, for me, when it comes to regrets, I don't like to focus on my regrets. I choose to believe that every decision that is made or everything that I've done has actually helped me to become the person I am today, even if I make mistakes.
Yeah, some people say if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, right? And that should be true about most things, because it's true that we do all make mistakes. We all sometimes experience a feeling of regret, and this word, friends, you might already know, can be used as a verb. Even though you'll see it as a noun throughout our lesson, you could regret something. I regret doing that, or I regret not doing something else.
And our lesson says, don't hide from regret, learn from it. What's better, to live a life without regrets or to have lingering pain over past mistakes? That's kind of a deep question because, I don't want to have lingering pain over past mistakes, but at the same time, I don't want to be living with regrets either.
Well, right, so it says to live a life without regrets. It seems like it's a pretty easy answer. We would all prefer to live a life without regrets, right?
Right,
Yeah.
That's what you would think.
So, we continue, almost all of us would choose to avoid the pain of wishing we'd done things differently. Regrets, people often feel, are to be avoided. So basically, don't make stupid decisions that you are going to regret.
Mistakes may be unavoidable, but they should be kept to a minimum. Okay, so obviously we're all going to make mistakes at times, but our lesson is saying that we should try to keep those mistakes to a minimum. And let's talk about that phrase, keep something to a minimum.
That's right. Well, minimum means the smallest amount or the smallest possible amount. So to keep something to a minimum is to keep it as small as possible.
That's right. Now, for example, maybe you're in your English class. Your teacher may say, please keep your Chinese speaking to a minimum. It's time for you to practice your English.
That's true. Or that reminds me of perhaps you're in a library, right? And the librarian might say, please keep your talking to a minimum. That means try not to talk, if possible. Think of another situation where you might use that phrase, to keep something to a minimum. Well, we read when they do occur, that means when mistakes do happen. The best course of action is to ignore them as inevitable steps on our journey. That means the best method, okay? And you can look in your magazine. A course of action is actually a usage tip that you can find out more details about in your magazine.
And that's exactly what I was talking about before. I choose to look at my life choices as being the steps or helping me to reach the place where I am today.
Yeah, exactly. And I think most of us are in the same shoes. We prefer to not think about those things or have regrets. But this next sentence should make us think, okay? That seems logical. That means to ignore our regrets, right? It seems logical, at least until you consider that one of the criteria for psychopathy is an inability to feel regret. In other words, psychopaths, and I would say sociopaths, basically kind of crazy people in society, one of their criteria or something that makes them like that is their inability to feel regret.
But is there a difference between choosing not to feel regret and an inability to feel regret? Something for you to think about.
I think so too. And you know what? Speaking of things done in the past, you just shouldn't cry over spilled milk, right?
Hey, that is a great phrase. Let's learn more about that phrase in the Info Cloud.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Info Cloud. Rex, I can't believe I completely forgot about our meeting yesterday. I'm so sorry.
It's okay, Joe. You know what they say, there's no use crying over spilled milk. We'll just have to schedule another time to meet.
I guess you're right. And I really like the phrase you used. There's no use crying over spilled milk.
This is a great way to express that while something unpleasant may have happened, being upset about it won't solve the problem.
Right. Well, let's break down the phrase itself. If you have a glass of milk and it gets knocked over, starting to cry won't help.
The milk is already on the floor, so instead of crying, the person should clean up the spilled milk.
And if they are still thirsty, they should pour themselves another glass. So you can also use this phrase to encourage someone to clean up after they made a mistake and try again.
For example, if my umbrella breaks when it's windy and raining, I might say, well, there's no use crying over spilled milk. I guess I need to buy a new umbrella.
Just keep in mind that we use this phrase to talk about small things that can be fixed or replaced, rather than big problems or hardships that need to be overcome.
Welcome back to Studio Classroom. Friends, did you know that one of the criteria for being a psychopath or a sociopath is the inability to feel regret? Of course, nobody likes thinking about past mistakes. Nobody likes having regrets in life. But should we just ignore them completely? That's the question that our lesson is addressing. Let's continue to find out more about this topic now.
Ignoring your biggest regrets. As author Catherine Schultz argues, if you want to be fully functional and fully human and fully humane, I think you need to learn to live not without regret, but with it. Counterintuitively, she and other experts argue feeling regret is essential for living your best life. No one is saying, of course, that wallowing in your past mistakes is a good idea. But neither is a no regrets and never look back mentality. Instead, the best way to view regret is as a wise teacher. According to leadership expert Manfred Ketz de Vries, Regret forces us to engage in a retrospective analysis to understand why we thought or acted the way we did.
Okay, let's see what Catherine Schultz has to say. She seems to be the expert of the hour, here in our lesson anyway. As author Catherine Schultz argues, if you want to be fully functional and fully human and fully humane, I think you need to learn to live not without regret, but with it. Now, at the beginning, it says that she's arguing, right? It's not she's in the middle of a debate. That's not what this means here. It just means she's presenting some points for us to consider, perhaps so that she can change our minds about something.
And perhaps other people don't necessarily agree with this particular point. Because we often use the word argue when someone presents something, but then other people might not necessarily agree. Anyway, there are a few things that we want to talk about in this sentence, starting with the word human, and we want to compare it to the word humane. They look very similar, and yet they have a different pronunciation.
That's true, and slightly different meanings as well. So, first, human. You and I are humans. Rebecca, a human being right here in the studio.
Oh, yeah.
And what it means to be human, that's the idea here. That is that you're able to sympathize and relate to other people in kind of a normal way. You're a relatable person, and you understand the weaknesses and strengths that human beings have. So that's what it means to be human.
Exactly. So you might say to someone, maybe to your friend, I'm human. All humans make mistakes. You can't expect me to be perfect.
That's right. Some people say, I'm only human, and we know what they mean usually is that we're not perfect. We make mistakes, because that's what it is, part of what it is to be a human being. Now, you see that word humane with an E at the end of that word, and that word carries the idea of treatment. Okay, it's how you treat people or other things. You treat them with respect and not cruel.
Right. For example, personally, I don't think it's very humane to keep a cat locked up in a small little cage all the time. Cats need to be able to run around because they have so much energy. So, in my opinion, that's not very humane.
Right, I agree with you. That's not humane at all. But, friends, you see in this picture, something humane might be giving dignity to somebody else by giving them something that they need for that day. But you're not just using this word. We cannot only use this word in talking about how to treat other people, but also, like Rebecca said, how to treat animals. Okay, we often use this to talk about people or animals. I found this picture of a raccoon in a cage because this is an example of a humane way to catch a raccoon, okay? They're not using a painful trap. No, this raccoon is okay, his body is fine, it's not harmed. This is a humane way to catch a raccoon.
And of course, you see the word humane in our lesson, but if you want to say that something is not humane, you can say inhumane. It's inhumane to keep a cat in a small cage all the time.
Exactly. So, if you want to be a fully functional, fully human, fully humane person, perhaps we should learn to live not without regret, but learn how to live with regret.
Now, of course, that is according to Catherine Schultz. Now, I think it's important to specify that because she is just one person with one opinion.
Sure. And she argues on here, counterintuitively, she and other experts argue feeling regret is essential for living your best life. Perhaps it has something to do with that comment about psychopathy earlier, right? If we want to be fully humane and human, then it means actually having feelings and sometimes feeling regret and, over our past mistakes sometimes.
Right. No one is saying, of course, that wallowing in your past mistakes is a good idea. Now, before we continue, we do want to take a look at this word, to wallow. What does it mean to wallow?
Yeah, this is great. So, wallow, the first thing that comes to my mind is some pigs, okay? They're rolling around in the mud because that's what they're doing. They're wallowing in the mud. So to wallow, in one sense, means to roll around in kind of a lazy way, all right? Now, the reason this word is in our lesson, and sometimes we use it like this, because we wallow in self-pity. And that means we become or remain helpless in some way.
Right. For example, you could say, Greg has a tendency to wallow in self-pity. And that just means that he's always thinking about himself, he's feeling sorry for himself, and that's all that he thinks about.
Yeah, friends, do you know anybody like that? Maybe you could think of somebody, but maybe you can encourage them too, like our lesson is doing, not to wallow in self-pity, not to wallow in your past mistakes. But we read on, but neither is a no regrets and never look back mentality. Instead, the best way to view regret is as a wise teacher, according to leadership expert Manfred Ketz de Vries. Oh, I love these names. So, view it as a wise teacher.
Right. Regret forces us to engage in a retrospective analysis to understand why we thought or acted the way we did. Now, this lesson definitely gives us a lot to think about it. And right now, it's time for us to join Doris and think about it.
We cannot change the past by regretting mistakes we've made or by things that we have not done in the past. It's not in our power to change the past, but we can learn from the past so we can have a better future. You know, mistakes are like water spilled on the ground. You cannot take them back no matter what, no matter how hard you try. The best thing about mistakes is to learn from them so that you won't make the same mistakes again. Then let go of the past and move forward older and wiser. We are certainly not perfect, but we do not need to live with regrets when we fail. There are too many wonderful things in this life to enjoy and cherish.
Thank you very much, Doris. Well, friends, this is a great thing for us to think about, right? Should we live with no regrets completely, or learn how to somehow live with our regrets? Of course, our lesson reminded us that does not mean wallowing in self-pity and continuing constantly to think about those terrible mistakes we made. But what could it mean? Let's find out more next time right here on Studio Classroom. See you then.